Sometimes, third-party control can be as simple as sending a command to a device and you're done. There are a lot of devices that can be controlled externally, such as projectors, video switchers, lighting controllers, etc. If all you need to do is send a command to that device and you don't need to collect any return information from it, then you can use the command buttons. These are designed to send simple one-way communication strings to a network device or a serial connection. In the command button's properties, you can decide how many command buttons you'd like. Each button will send one specific string, and you can add up to 64 buttons in the component. You can also specify if you're sending commands via TCP, UDP, or serial. TCP and UDP commands are simply sent out onto the network, but serial commands are sent to a physical serial connection. When you select serial, you'll notice that a trapezoidal pin is added to the component, which can only be wired to another serial pin. Many Q-SYS devices have an RS-232 port, which is represented within Designer as an inventory component associated with that device. Simply connect this component to your command buttons. If you're wiring to a serial port, this is one of the few times that you should forget the rule that pins on the left of an object are inputs and pins on the right are outputs. Don't worry that it looks like command buttons are only receiving information, because in this case, that single connection works in both directions. Inside the command button's control panel, you'll need to configure some information about the receiving device. In serial mode, you'll need to input the baud rate, data bits, parity, and stop bits. For TCP and UDP commands, you'll need the device's IP address and its communication ports. The IP address is something you may have configured yourself, but you should be able to find all the rest of this information in your device's user manual or documentation. Let's push our Designer file to the core. Now that we're up and running, let's look inside the serial port block. When you send a message, there are counters in this block that will show you how many bytes of data is transmitted or received through the serial port. This is very useful for troubleshooting purposes, like the RS-232 cable not being wired correctly. Other than that, there's not much to do. Type in the command string here, and when you press the trigger button on the left, it will send that command to the end device. You could also expose the control pins for each of these triggers, allowing something else within Q-SYS to fire the command. Or, like any other control, you could add these triggers to the named controls bin, allowing you to schedule these triggers to be activated from your administrator's command scheduler. Once again, command buttons offer one-way communication, so you won't get any sort of feedback from the device indicating that it received the command or has performed the action. You do have a status indicator that will tell you the health of the connection, but that does not report any information about the device's activity. However, if you're using command buttons, it's probably because you don't need or care about any information returning. For instance, if you can see the lights change, well then you know the lighting controller received your command. So the final question, but unfortunately the only difficult one, is this. How do you know what to type as a command? These commands vary wildly by manufacturer, and you may need to do a little bit of legwork in order to find them. But most manufacturers, if they're worth their salt, will have a list of their device's commands available somewhere. Maybe it's in a user guide, a supplemental guide, or you may need to email them directly. Since there are over 9 trillion different manufacturers of third-party devices, we can't do much to help you find those commands. However, we do want to point out one common mistake a lot of people make. A lot of manufacturers require a carriage return at the end of the command to note that the command string is complete. This information might be displayed in different ways. For instance, this manual displays it like so, bracket CR close bracket. As a quick history lesson, carriage return is sort of an archaic term, referring to a time way before computers when we typed with typewriters. The typewriter's carriage moved to the left by 1 character every time you pressed a key, and when it got to the end of the page, you would press carriage return to bring it back to the right. The idea of carriage return has been replaced with the enter key on most keyboards, but you'll still find this terminology associated with the execution of computer commands. The tricky part is that this text, bracket CR, should not be typed literally. A carriage return is represented in different ways in different coding languages. So this instruction here is telling you to input a carriage return based on whatever language you're using. Since Q-SYS uses Lua as its scripting language, you can enter a carriage return by typing \R. The \ character in Lua tells the compiler that the following character should not be interpreted literally and is instead a secret code to perform some other function. R stands for return. You could also execute a new line command, which some manuals might call for, with the \n command. Or you could use \x to signify that the following two characters should be interpreted as a hexadecimal value. Hopefully you won't have to dig too deep into these types of conversions when using command buttons. But knowing that the \R is often required to cap off your command string, that's an important one. These same concepts will actually be useful again if you start coding bidirectional communications using either the Lua script or the block controller, which we'll look at in future videos. Until then, we have an exercise on the command buttons in your control training worksheet, so take a look at that before moving on to the next video.